Every series, I think, needs a bit of a pause, a breath before we take the plunge. And that's what this episode is meant to be. It's it's that hinge between what we've been exploring all month in our virtue versus vice series and what we're about to confront in our next season with what I've been calling the 764 movement. It's both like a reflection and a brace. See, for weeks we've been asking hard questions about the tension between being good and being whole. And we've explored what happens when virtues like gentleness and service or calm or affection get hollowed out and when they become masks for avoidance rather than these pathways to intimacy. And we've wrestled with the sobering truths that even our noblest of qualities can actually betray us if they're not rooted in integrity. And here's why that matters so deeply. And that's because false virtue doesn't stop at personal disappointment. It doesn't just rob us of intimacy. It in essence sets the stage for something much more dangerous, because when being good becomes more important than being real, we create cracks. And those cracks are exactly where exploitation and manipulation and despair begin to creep in. And what looks like virtue can actually prepare the ground for vice. Not the obvious kind, but the insidious kind that wears the mask of care while quietly consumes us. And that's why I can't stop here. See, if we ended with virtue versus vice, it would feel incomplete. And yes, we've uncovered ways that we betray ourselves with false virtues, and yes, we've also challenged ourselves to choose integrity over image. But we haven't really confronted the larger forces, the cultural, ideological, and systemic patterns that weaponize our cracks for their own gain. And that's where we're heading with the 764 movement. And so let me now be clear. I see what we're about to step into is really heavy. It's disturbing. These next episodes coming up aren't going to be easy listens. But I wouldn't bring this to you if I didn't believe that it was necessary. Because my mission here at Uber Vintagers, it's always been about integrity and intimacy. Integrity, which for me is the alignment between who we are on the inside and how we live on the outside. And intimacy, the courage to be seen fully and honestly without the masks. Both of these are under attack, I think, in the realities that we're about to face. And I believe that if we can shine a light here, we can also maybe find our way back to wholeness. So think of this episode today as kind of a brace, if you will. It's the moment where I tell you to prepare yourself. We're going deeper, we're going darker and heavier than we have before. But we're not going to stay in the dark though. See, every step into heaviness, I think, also points us towards hope. Every glimpse of the despair that we'll explore will carry a thread of redemption. Because the point isn't to shock or to crush you. The point is reclamation. See, false virtue, I think, always begins with good intentions. See, we want to be kind and we want to keep the peace. We want to serve. We want to help. When those impulses are driven more by fear of conflict or hunger for approval than by conviction, they become hollow. They stop being strength and they start being performance. And performance always has cracks, I think. I mean, think about it. If my primary concern is to be seen as good rather than to live as whole, then I will compromise and I'll withhold truth just to keep the harmony, right? And I'll say yes when I really mean no. And I'll ignore my own boundaries just to maintain an image. And on the outside, people may admire me, yes. They may applaud my selflessness or my patience or my politeness. But inside, I'm eroding. I'm not living in integrity. I'm not bringing my full self to the table. So why does this matter so much? It's because those cracks, the gaps between who I am and who I'm pretending to be are, are exactly where exploitation thrives. See, manipulation always looks for weakness, I think. And nothing is weaker than a man who's trying to protect an image while he's in essence hiding his reality. See, when fear drives virtue, it creates vulnerabilities that can actually be weaponized. So this is how the entire movements of control and despair gain traction. They don't start by telling you to destroy yourself. They in essence start by appealing to your good desires, right? And then they present themselves as wisdom and as care and as belonging. And they wear this mask of virtue, like with patience and loyalty and sacrifice. And before you know it, what looked noble becomes a trap. And that's why I believe that false virtue is not just a personal issue. It's more of a societal danger. It conditions us to accept appearances over authenticity, or silence over truth, or even performance over presence. And when a culture normalizes those patterns, it leaves people wide open to manipulation. And that's what the 764 movement, I think, feeds on. It takes these cracks that are created by false virtue and it widens them until people can no longer even trust themselves. And this is why integrity matters so deeply. Integrity is not just about perfection. It's more so about alignment, I would say. It's about saying, I will not pretend to be good at the expense of being whole. I will not trade my honesty for applause. Or I will not settle for looking right while I'm living wrong. And when we live that way, we close those cracks. We fortify ourselves against the manipulation. And we become resilient to the very tactics that exploit false virtues. See, the 764 movement, I think it thrives because too many of us have been trained to settle for virtue without integrity. And that's why this pivot is so urgent, I think. We can't just talk about how vices undermine us. I think we have to also talk about how counterfeits of virtue are weaponized against us. And in naming that, I think we begin to reclaim the power of integrity and intimacy as acts of resistance. See, this is not just about identifying what's broken. It's about preparing to step into the fire with courage. Because truth and integrity and intimacy are far stronger than any counterfeit can be. They don't just expose the lies, they dismantle them. See, whenever I step into heavier content, I ask myself one question first, and that is, why am I doing this? Because heaviness for its own sake, it doesn't help anyone, right? Shock alone does not transform lives, and I think what makes a difference is really clarity. What makes a difference is naming what's real so that freedom becomes possible. And that's why I cannot ignore the 764 movement. It's just another trend that wants to be seen like a trend, but it's not. It's a pattern, a deeply disturbing pattern that reveals how fear and despair and manipulation are dressed up as care and wisdom and belonging. It's what happens when false virtue is taken to its extreme and then it's weaponized. And it's not just individual avoidance or performance anymore. It's entire systems and communities that are teaching people to trade integrity for illusions and intimacy for control and hope for despair. So let me be clear, this next season is going to be heavy. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The stories that we're going to unpack, the mechanics of manipulation that we're going to expose, they're not easy to hear. And for some, it may actually feel overwhelming. And that's why I want to pause here and brace us. This is not about wallowing in the dark. It's about shining a light that thrives in the dark. It's about saying, we're not going to look away. But it's also about hope. Because here's the truth. I think the 764 movement, it may entrap many, but it cannot ultimately define, right? Fear may disguise itself as wisdom, but it cannot erase real courage. Manipulation, manipulation may fracture intimacy, but it cannot destroy the possibility of being seen and known again. That's the thread that we're going to hold on to every heavy episode. No matter how deep the counterfeit runs, integrity and intimacy will remain stronger. See, here at Uber Vintagers, my mission has always been to call men into lives of integrity and intimacy. And for me, this isn't just theory, this is survival. I know what it looks and feels like to live in a split way, to perform instead of being real, to seek applause while hiding my truths. And I know the freedom of choosing alignment instead. And that's why I can't just speak about the lighter struggles of virtue and vice. I have to also expose these darker structures that steal wholeness from men before they even know that they've lost it in the first place. So this next series is not just content. This is considered more like a call to see what's happening around all of us, to recognize the counterfeits for what they truly are, and to reclaim intimacy and integrity as acts of defiance. It'll be disturbing at times, but I think the only reason that we face disturbing things is because we believe in restoration. And the only reason that we unmask the counterfeits is to reclaim what is true. And that's what this hinge is for, and why it matters so much. Without this pause, it might feel almost like whiplash, going from virtues and vice and straight into something that unsettles to the core. Yay. But what this brace is, I want you to know, this is where we're going to be going, and this is the why. Not to shock you and not to crush you, but to reclaim. I think we've spent this month exposing some significant cracks, the ways even our best intentions can betray us when they're not rooted in integrity. I think we've seen how gentleness becomes avoidance, and how service becomes disappearance, and even how affection becomes like a performance, and how virtue becomes a mask. And it would be easy to stop there, to simply say, do better, right? Or try harder, or be more authentic. But the truth is, the story doesn't need to, sorry, my camera's just falling down on me. The story does not need to end with these individual choices. I think these cracks that we've identified aren't just personal. They're more the entry point, if you will, for something that's far larger, something that's more systematic, something that's even predatory. And that's why we can't stop with virtue versus vice. See, to end here would be to leave the stage halfway through. The next series, this 764 movement, will turn the rest of the lights on, if you will. It will expose those cracks, not just as personal struggles, but also as cultural vulnerabilities that get exploited. And it will reveal how fear masquerades as wisdom, and how despair dresses up as realism, and how counterfeit communities mimic belonging. And yes, it's going to be heavy. I won't pretend otherwise. These are disturbing realities, and they're going to weigh on us as we face them. But heaviness is not the same as hopelessness, right? Remember that. In fact, the very reason to face the heavy is because we believe in hope. The only reason to uncover the counterfeit is to reclaim what is real. Integrity and intimacy are not fragile. They are resilient. They outlast the lies. They outshine the counterfeits. And they are, I believe, our way back when fear and manipulation have done their worst. So here at Uber Vintagers, like I said, my mission, I want to call men to these lives of integrity and intimacy. And that mission does not stop at the surface. In fact, I think it demands that we go deeper, even into the uncomfortable, even when it's disturbing, because that's where healing begins. So if we want to be whole, we can't just polish what's easy. We actually have to face what's broken. And that's what this next season will be all about. So here's my invitation. I want you to brace yourself, but don't turn away. See, the 764 movement, this series is going to take us through deep shadows, yes, but it will also lead us towards a vision, towards a possibility of living unmasked or untangled or unafraid, toward the freedom that comes when integrity replaces performance and when intimacy replaces an illusion. Vice or vision, that's, I think, the choice before us in this moment. False virtue prepares the way for despair, but vision that's grounded in integrity and intimacy prepares the way for wholeness. And that's where we're heading next. I hope you'll stick with me. I can't wait to get into it with you. See you soon.